Hey y'all, it's been a while. It's time to climb the labyrinth a little bit. I've been kind of crazy busy with some things going on, just a couple of funerals and Easter time and a family vacation, so I haven't put out any content other than a few sermons and a little bit of music stuff here and there. I got to get to something that this one really started bugging me with all of the things going on in the news media right now with the Chauvin trial. The verdict just came through yesterday. Right now, as I'm recording this, it's Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Kids are downstairs doing kiddo stuff. Here's the thing. I got an email this afternoon from the RCA denominational office. The RCA is in the denomination that most of Dakota Classis and much of the Midwest is probably leaving. And the email comes, and this is the usual news and resources full of woke propaganda garbage. I mean, some of it is not that the content is bad in its entirety. It's that the progressive propaganda agenda behind it is awful. So I'm going to jump in here and just let you read. I'm going to read some of this to you. I'll put it up on the screen over here that you can see. And then we'll break down some of this stuff and why it's so bad. Here we go. Okay, so this is news and resources. Hi, friends. Oh, yeah. Hi, friends. Maybe we're not friends. Because just because you're friends on Facebook doesn't mean that you're actually friends. Or friends on anything doesn't mean you're actually friends unless you hang out a little bit. So in the light of the verdicts yesterday in the trial following George Floyd's death, in the light of the killing of Wright 10 days ago, Bryant yesterday, in light of ongoing violence against Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and all the racial injustices of the last year, and stretching as far back into history as we care to look, I commend to you the new Dismantling Racism Resources page on the RCA website. And then it gives a few more things. But here's the big thing that bugs me. The big thing that bugs me is right off the bat, this is the thing that they send out. In the light of the verdicts of yesterday's trial for George Floyd, that was not a racially motivated killing. Are you kidding me? It wasn't racially motivated at all. That is complete propaganda spin so that we can get some sort of backing behind it to get people angry so that we can get more of a push. This is exactly what went on all the years. I mean, even the old school yellow journalism of I believe World War II, and even what goes on in China right now, where they tell you everything is great even though it's not. That in the light of the verdicts, so because of the verdicts, we want you to be aware of racism. Are you kidding me? Okay, just real briefly, Derek Chauvin was charged with 3 things. One was second-degree felony murder, which is you're supposed to be committing a felony while committing that murder happens. So it's a murder that happens while committing a felony. Okay, I don't think he was doing that because he's a policeman and he was doing his job the way that he was trained to do his job. Now, okay, I am not a lawyer. I am not a litigator. I am not somebody that is super savvy in all those things, although I am smart enough to read and listen and to follow along a little bit of the trial. The second one was third-degree murder of some sort. I think it's like a depraved heart or something. Basically, the premise was that it would be a person that commits an act of violence or felony and kills somebody in the process, but not intentionally. So you shoot a gun into a crowd and you don't necessarily mean to shoot a particular person, but somebody does die. Well, then you get third-degree felony murder. So those 2 things aren't necessarily 2 things that Derek Chauvin did. The third one, the manslaughter charge, I could see him actually getting convicted of that. I don't know whether that was beyond a reasonable doubt from the things that I saw, especially for the verdict to come back so fast. What that does tell you is everything was pushed. Everything was getting a push, particularly along the side of the racial lines. So you have people that go to the area, and what happens is everybody is deathly afraid of these riots if the verdicts don't come back as guilty. Well, that's clearly not justice. That's not accountability. That is mob mentality. That is like when you watch the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix holds his hand up and the mob decides whether they live or die. This is exactly what's going on in Minnesota. This is exactly what the news media is doing to all of the United States. This is what they're trying to tell you, is that everything is racially motivated. So then if everything is racially motivated, then they can come down hard on you for the things that happen. This is complete garbage. The Derek Chauvin trial, they never talked about race. They never proved any racism. They never even made that a thing from the prosecution about racism. That was a media bias spin that people have picked up on to try and get what they want. Right here, the RCA is doing exactly the same thing. In the light of the verdicts yesterday, we should talk about racism. Why? See, when you watch it, what they wanted you to see is a white man oppressing a black man. That was not what was happening. George Floyd has a horrible track record and was on all sorts of drugs. Did he deserve to die? Absolutely not. But that was not something that was racially motivated. And you go further, and then the killing of Daunte Wright. This was an officer that admitted her own guilt. She thought it was a taser. Did she mean to kill him? No. So then how do you consider that racially motivated? It wasn't. She wasn't yelling any sort of slurs. She wasn't known for being racially biased towards or against black people, or brown people, or anybody. The Ma'Khia Bryant one, this is a girl that was trying to stab another girl and was told to put it down and to stop and didn't. Now, you could be the other girl who was about to get stabbed and be thankful, maybe. Like, some of this stuff is just so blown out of perspective, and it drives me nuts that we have people in the RCA that are continuing to push this agenda. They're continuing to push this agenda that we're just a whole bunch of racist people in the Americas. No, not at all. I'm pretty sure the statistics would show that black people in America, and almost every race in America, is probably more well off than anywhere else on the planet. This is just complete garbage. This is spin to try and manipulate you into either A, being like the people that send these email out, and virtue signal to say that you're so sorry and we need to stand against these things. And you go, well, what did you actually do wrong? What did you actually do right, other than try and send something out to just tell everybody how great you are? I'm pretty sure it's C.S. Lewis that says you need to be very, very careful of the person that will point out the fault in their neighbor and be the one that says how horrible things are as an apology that really isn't a real apology. And when I dig into this more, so there's the basic premise of just the racism that they're trying to push as an agenda. Even though I would say we are more racially divided in the United States than we had been over the last 10, 15 years. But for a while there, things were going really well. Thomas Sowell has some great stuff that you can read as a man that lived through some of the things of racial segregation and Jim Crow and all of that to see where we are now. And he's just ridiculously smart. But as we jump in, then you go, okay, so RCA, what are you telling me to do? You need to go to this dismantling racism resources. Okay, I will click on the dismantling racism. And what do we get? We get dismantling racism. The RCA is committed to working towards a multicultural future, blah, 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 the usual stuff. And then we get this line here. I'll zoom in on it so you can hopefully see it. The RCA commitment is to name racism as a sin. I don't remember racism being a sin in the Bible. I don't. Now, there are things that maybe get invented along the way that we could name as sin. Maybe this is a subset of a different sin. But race as it is today was not a concept in biblical history. There was ethnicity. There was definitely the aspect of God's chosen people versus the Gentiles throughout the Old Testament history. The Gentiles, that was not based on race. That was based on whether you were a part of God's covenant family or you were not a part of God's covenant family. I mean, even if you just look at the history of the Jewish people, there's a whole lot of different races in there. So some of that is just brand new age propaganda, woke progressive garbage bleeding into right here. So we want to name racism as a sin. Okay, yes, there's been racism within the United States history and others throughout the world that is sinful. Absolutely, I agree with that. And to work against its prevalence and pervasiveness, both within our relationships and in our denominational system. So suddenly our denominational system has racism in it. Did they ever say what it was? I don't see that. And in the wider domestic and global communities. Our effort at eradicating racism call for us to change not only our systems, but also our hearts for each other and for the life matters that concern each other. This is from the RCA's General Secretary's interpretation of General Synod Council ending Policy E5. I couldn't find E5 anywhere, so I don't know what that is. Apparently, the General Synod Council ended that, and this is what the General Secretary thought. What General Secretary? When did he say this? We have no context whatsoever. We have no idea what he's talking about, other than it just sounds really nice. This is woke virtue signal. This is RCA's way of saying, shame on you white people for just being white. Period. It's ridiculous. You go further in and we get to what are some things that you can get involved with. 1 Corinthians 13 project is the very first thing that pops up right here. 1 Corinthians 13 project. This is the Reverend Dr. Denise Kingdom Greer. The one that was the last time we talked about some of her stuff was the one that says that we as a church are complicit in the racism that went on throughout the Americas. All of that is the outpouring, the extreme outpouring of critical theory, critical race theory specifically, that there are oppressors and that the people that feel oppressed, as long as you fall within the intersectional lines of you're more oppressed if you are a woman rather than a man, so that's one, and if you're more oppressed if you are a woman of color as opposed to just a white woman, so that's two, and then you start adding all these things down the line of all the different levels of oppression, and then what happens is anybody that's on the opposite side of that, they're the bad people, they're the oppressors. That's not always the case. There are some good people in there, and just because you're grouped into a grouping doesn't mean that you've done anything at all. But it's easier to blame a system than to actually address individual issues. I would love to address individual issues if you could find them, but there really aren't any. So you have to make them up. That's what's going on here. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here. And then it gets into the next one is we have to have now a space for non-black people of color and ethnic diversity, because the one before is basically just geared towards black African American people. And then so now we have all these other people. So there's Latino, Asian, Native American, and multicultural ministry leaders. Okay, well, whatever happened to being the church just together? All of us. This is creating more division than there was before. This is propagating a gospel that is counterintuitive to actually being unified. I'm losing it over some of this stuff. The next thing that really gets me is we're going racism, all within the RCA. But when was the last time? I mean, even up here, it's This work is informed by more than 60 years of guidance from the General Synod as it's talked about racism and the struggles that the United States has had over the last multiple decades, century at least, within the 60 years. When was the last time the RCA sent out an email that said, here's what we really believe about sexuality. Here's what we really believe about you being a man and a woman. Here's what we really believe about those things. They don't. They don't at all, even though those things have explicitly been said too. That's because they don't like that they've been said, because it doesn't fit the narrative that the RCA wants to spin. This is garbage. It's hypocritical garbage. Like, the content of saying don't be racist is absolutely true. Nobody's going to argue with that. But manufacturing racism in places that it's not. The Chauvin trial was not racism. It's being manufactured into that, but that was never involved. The Duante Wright thing, not there either. The other girl, I forget her name now, that was trying to stab another girl and got shot, not there either. But we have to manufacture it. And even more so, then there was an email that came out 10 minutes after the one in here from Christina. After she sends this out, within 10 minutes, then Eddie Alaman sends out his email that says, in light of all the things going on, I want to have a time of prayer and a little biblical reflection on Friday. So please join me on Zoom. In light of what things going on? Oh, you mean in light of all of the racism that's going on. But what if racism isn't going on? What if racism is being manufactured? What if racism is being pushed? What if the struggle is if you're looking at racism, you're not seeing all the other things that are slipping past? This stuff just really bothers me. As a parent of kids that aren't white and growing up predominantly in areas where it wasn't all white people, this stuff is bonkers. Like, this is, it honestly makes it worse. It makes it worse. So here's how we bring it all back. No longer slave, no longer free. No longer Jew, no longer Gentile, no longer man, no longer woman, no longer any of those divisions. There is one body of Christ. And if you are united to Christ, then you do not need to live into these lies. What you need to do is live a Christ-like life. That doesn't mean that you can't call out racism and sin where it really is. But what it does mean is you can't just manufacture it anywhere you want it to be just because it fits your agenda, just because it fits your bias and spin. This stuff has no place in Christ Church. This is one of the main reasons that I am so over the RCA, so over it. Okay, that's a long rant. Climbing the labyrinth. Let's hopefully we can have one that's a little more helpful or not so grumpy oriented. But that's it. Later, y'all.